Moi, j'habite à Moncton, au Nouveau-Brunswick. Lorsque j'ai terminé mes études à l'école secondaire, je me demandais où est-ce que c'est que je voulais me rendre pour mes études. Donc, j'ai décidé de compléter un bac multidisciplinaire aux arts à l'Université de Moncton. J'ai gradué en 2010. Et ensuite de ça, j'ai pris le baccalauréat en traduction, le programme accéléré à l'Université de Moncton, encore une fois. Et j'ai terminé mes études en 2012. Depuis la fin de mes études, j'ai été à la recherche d'un emploi plutôt stable. J'ai eu l'occasion de traduire des contrats ici et là de la maison et j'ai resté impliquée bénévolement pour un bon nombre d'organismes. Et depuis le mois de février de cette année, je suis en train de prendre un cours de formation de coach en santé émotionnelle. Ça s'appelle Emotional Fitness. On a traduit ça comme la santé émotionnelle. Et aussi, je suis en train de traduire des ressources à ce niveau-là aussi. Actuellement, je suis en train de traduire les ressources pour un livre qui a été écrit en santé émotionnelle. Donc, c'est un manuel. C'est vraiment un livre qui explique tout le concept. Je suis en train de traduire ça tout de suite et je suis aussi en train de pratiquer les divers outils que j'ai appris dans mon cours. Je suis en train de pratiquer ça dans différentes séances aussi pour pouvoir devenir une coach l'année prochaine. L'objectif, vraiment la base de tout ça, c'est tout fondé sur la puissance de l'écoute. Le concept, c'est un peu dans l'équilibre de soi. Ça montre un peu comment c'est important d'être à l'écoute des gens sans donner notre avis, sans juger, en redonnant qu'est-ce qu'on a entendu et aussi en posant des questions de clarification pour les aider ensuite à faire leur propre plan. Alors, tout le monde se prend en main en prenant une séance comme ceci. C'est vraiment centré sur l'autre personne. Puis, c'est tellement valorisant pour les autres, mais aussi pour moi-même. C'est souvent des obstacles pour pouvoir trouver un emploi que j'ai rencontré parce que pour conserver un emploi, les petits contrats que j'ai faits, je les ai terminés. Mais pour pouvoir trouver un emploi, c'était souvent des craintes face aux employeurs. Beaucoup d'employeurs ont des craintes que soit que les adaptations seraient trop coûteuses ou soit que parce que j'ai un handicap, que je ne serais pas capable de compléter des tâches dans un délai qui est demandé ou que ce soit aussi précis en raison de ma cécité. J'ai aussi des obstacles au niveau du transport. Parfois, ça peut être difficile si je ne sais pas comment me rendre d'un endroit à un autre. J'ai besoin de la formation spécialisée pour pouvoir me rendre. Donc, ça peut causer un petit délai. Et il y a aussi des défis au niveau de la technologie. Parfois, les lecteurs d'écran ne sont pas toujours compatibles avec tous les programmes qui sont employés dans les divers endroits. Moi, je suis non-voyante de naissance. C'est mon nerf optique qui ne s'est pas développé. J'ai vécu comme ceci toute ma vie. Donc, il y a des obstacles, ce n'est pas juste à l'emploi, il y a des obstacles qui sont reliés à la vie quotidienne que j'ai dû faire face. C'est beaucoup, justement, comme au niveau du transport, de pouvoir savoir où me rendre d'un endroit à l'autre, parce que si je ne suis pas capable de voir où je vais, je dois me trouver d'autres points de repère. Lorsque c'est l'hiver, c'est des grands défis parce qu'avec la neige, la glace, c'est beaucoup plus difficile de se promener d'un endroit à un autre. Il y a aussi, je sais que je l'ai mentionné auparavant un peu, mais au niveau de la technologie, autant que c'est tellement une bénédiction d'avoir des si bons éléments de technologie qui deviennent de plus en plus avancés. il y a encore du chemin à faire un peu, que ce n'est pas toujours compatible avec tous les programmes, qui peut causer un défi, surtout au niveau visuel. Je dois m'assurer d'avoir quelque chose qui m'aide à pouvoir soit parler ou d'avoir ça accessible en braille pour moi. Donc ça englobe un peu l'ensemble des défis que je peux, auxquels je peux faire face. Puis aussi l'ouverture des gens un peu à avoir confiance en moi que je suis capable d'accomplir toutes les tâches comme tout le monde. Oui, alors moi, je suis pas mal un livre ouvert, pas mal du début. C'est quelque chose que je vais souvent faire, que je vais le rapprocher quand même de façon que je suis quand même claire en ce que j'ai besoin, mais aussi, je n'ai pas peur non plus de dire que j'ai beaucoup de mes propres équipements et que je suis quand même capable de bien accomplir les tâches quand même. Mais je trouve ça important pas mal du début de mentionner qu'est-ce qui sont mes adaptations. C'est sûr que j'ai toujours cette petite hésitation de me demander qu'est-ce que les gens peuvent penser, mais puisque j'ai un handicap qui est très visible, surtout avec des rencontres en personne, avec des gens, lorsque j'arrive avec ma canne blanche, pas mal du début, je ferai face à des questions. Un peu de la sorte. Alors, je me dis, si je suis ouverte du début, on dirait que les choses sont un peu plus faciles pour moi. Ça a été quand même un peu de long processus pour moi d'avoir tout ce que j'avais besoin du début parce qu'il y a beaucoup de choses qu'il faut remplir. Je dois travailler avec beaucoup de différentes personnes pour justifier pourquoi j'ai besoin de ces équipements-là, comme surtout lorsque j'étais aux études, puis tout ça. Lorsque c'est venu pour le marché du travail, ben, j'avais déjà beaucoup des équipements que j'avais eus pendant mes études. Fait que là, ça avait été pas si pire, mais au début, ça a quand même été un processus. Puis encore récemment, là, lorsque j'ai fallu demander pour un renouvellement de mon lecteur d'écran, par exemple, j'ai dû comme recommencer le processus un peu, ce qui avait créé un peu de frustration, là, quand même. Mais j'ai quand même pu passer au travers. Il y a eu des défis autour de ça, mais j'ai pu quand même très bien m'en tirer parce que j'ai pu avoir ce que j'avais besoin. Ben, moi, qu'est-ce que j'ai à dire? C'est, premièrement, de ne pas abandonner, que c'est un choix personnel, vraiment, si tu veux dévoiler ton handicap ou non. C'est vraiment un choix personnel, mais en le dévoilant, on peut faire face au fait que peut-être les réponses peuvent être un peu différentes, mais au bout de la ligne, les personnes qui veulent vraiment nous embaucher vont, tu sais, comme qui savent vraiment qui on est, tu sais, les résultats sont beaucoup meilleurs, mais aussi de ne pas avoir peur de dire exactement qu'est-ce que c'est que vous avez besoin pour pouvoir faire un bon travail au bout de la ligne.
That was an awesome vignette. Thank you so much. So now it is my great pleasure. We're a couple of minutes early, but I think we're okay. So it's my, let me just open my little cheat sheet of introductions here. Actually, it's my sincere pleasure to introduce you to the moderator for the next session, which is employee engagement and workplace culture, exemplary movements going forward for engagement of employees with disabilities. Megan Kelly. And I get the honor of working with Megan as she holds the position of National Manager Business Solutions here at CCRW. So in her role, just very briefly, in her role, Megan connects with businesses across the country and covers their specific need as it relates to accessibility, disability, and work, and develops customized CCRW services that will support the businesses in hiring and retaining persons with disabilities. And Megan is currently working out of the CCRW office in St. John's, Newfoundland. So Megan, we won't be having a Q&A at the end of this plenary, unless for some weird reason we've got the time gods are on our side. So sit back and enjoy, and over to you, Megan.
Thank you so much, Maureen. It's an honor to be here on day 4 and the final day of the DWC conference this year. I would like to just start by reiterating some of the accessibility features of the session as Tammy, introduced us to earlier today. There is ASL available as well as closed captioning at the bottom of your screen, and I believe interpretation as well. So as Maureen said, my name is Megan Kelly. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. I'm the National Manager of Business Development at the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, CCRW. We're so excited to have you here for this session, Employee Engagement and Workplace Culture. This was really going to be a fireside chat, a conversation, so get comfortable, turn on a fireplace if there's one near you, but we're excited to engage in conversation and for you to experience that with us. I'm so honored to have 2 very exciting guests join me. We have Jason Bromett, Head of Modern Work and Security Business with Microsoft, as well as Todd Peters, owner, operator of River City Remanufacturing. So Todd and Jason, I welcome you to turn on your cameras when you feel comfortable to do so. Hi, Jason.
Hello,
And
hello.
hello, Todd. Wonderful. So my guests today, Jason and Todd, will share different perspectives on employee engagement and workplace culture. How did we all stay connected during COVID-19, and what will we take forward with us? When we think about workplace culture and employee engagement, we keep in mind that not all sectors made an immediate pivot to work from home or remote work, and that some of the key elements of employee engagement is through supportive management, creating positive work environments, whether the environment is virtual, hybrid, or in person, encouraging trust in leadership, trust in dialogue, and trust in productivity. These are also themes that we prioritize when we talk about inclusive and accessible workplaces and workspaces. So with that, Todd, I'm going to put you on the spot to start first because we tested your Zoom earlier and I know it works. Tell us about River City Remanufacturing and your journey with employing people with disabilities. How have you created positive workplace culture, and what do you see emerging from the impacts of COVID-19? And Jason, we'll start with you. Jason, you're coming from, the big tech sector where a virtual work model was something that could be easily pivoted to. And I'm going to quote you here, not to make you feel uncomfortable. One of the things I've heard you say, which has stuck with me, is about, accessibility being built in and not bolted on. And how has the journey through COVID and, re-emerging from COVID impacting the way you work and employee engagement at Microsoft?
Thanks for the easy question and the quote to start with, Megan. Just humbled to be here. Thank you so much. By means of quick introduction, I'm a white male today. I'm wearing a nice bright fuchsia sweater and blue glasses with salt and pepper hair. And I identify with the pronouns he, him. And again, just humbled to be here joining the conversation today. Listen, you're right. So, and maybe I'll go down a couple paths and you can take us down whatever journey makes the most sense. For us at Microsoft, just as orientation, and many on the phone today may have heard this in the past, which is our mission that was really designed by Satya back when he took over as CEO back in 2014 is empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And when we look statistically, certainly globally, I think the most recent stats are now just over 1 billion people in the world with a disability, whether that be visible or invisible, whether that be permanent, situational, or temporary. Our ability to empower those individuals and all of us with technology that enables great, inclusive, accessible experiences, frankly, the lack of doing so stands in our ability to ever aspire to achieving our mission. And so as a company, this idea of being built in versus bolted on is systemically centered in our culture and who we are as an organization. We view it as our responsibility. And I'm humbled to play the role of leading the business that is the technology that most people will know because it is most end user facing, things like Office and Microsoft Teams. But I also lead our commercial accessibility initiative for the Canadian market. And so for us, it is this idea that says built in versus bolted on. And part of it is grounded deeply in this idea of inclusive design. Inclusion ultimately drives innovation. And obviously, we've all had experiences. One of the most common examples that I'll share, and by no means is it the only one, is curb cuts. It's a very simple thing that we all take for granted today. I was a skateboarder as a kid. I'm a cyclist as an adult. Curb cuts benefit me still to this day. They benefited me as a skateboarder, but they also benefit parents who may be pushing a stroller. They also benefit individuals that may need walking assistance or a wheelchair. And again, it was innovating for one, but extending to many. And so for us, we believe this ability that says innovating for a few, but extending to many creates innovation that we all can benefit from, and ultimately that we all participate in. As a company, yes, we are a technology company. And so the idea of remote work is not foreign to us. We are empowered, I generally joke, which is I need little more than this phone to be able to do 100% of the work that I need to do in the course of the day. But there's also been huge ramifications for us as a company in this transition to remote work. And so I don't want to discount it, nor do I want to assume or state, and I know Todd will give the good counterbalance to this, which is not every organization nor every employee was able to go home. We had, in many ways, frontline workers that were frankly the digital first responders for all of us, for the country, that really enabled us to continue to operate. We need those individuals to keep our supply chains moving, our manufacturing facilities, our food. You can just kind of run through the nameless list, and of course, healthcare. And so for us, it was, I'll say, relatively easy in terms of the ability to do it. But if I just look at my own personal journey, how I've had to change how I work, how I engage and support my team, how do I create behaviors and practices that I, as an individual, as a father, as a coworker, as a manager, as a leader in the company, we've all had to adapt in very different ways. And there's good and there's bad. There's no question about it, and I won't sugarcoat it. But technology has been a great connector, and it's part of what I deeply believe, especially as we think about those that are living with disabilities, again, across the continuum, whether that be visual, mental, or physical. Technology can empower us to do amazing things and empower everybody to do amazing things. And so it's exciting to be able to do that. I think in many ways, as we look forward and think about hybrid work, the opportunities in many ways are endless. And I think it's going to create new opportunities that for sad reasons, I will say, were underaddressed prior to the pandemic. And I've read a number of articles which says, isn't it a shame that we needed a pandemic to push some of these issues to the foreground? And I think it's actually benefited us that way because it's forcing us to have some conversations that were much overdue.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jason, for getting us started. And
no problem.
Yeah, some of the points you brought up, I still hear synergies in terms of, parts of Todd's story that I know, specifically around, empowering those to achieve more. And, the inclusive design piece and, innovation and how it, if you're doing for one, it could impact many and has really high potential to do so. So thanks for that, really empowering pieces to get us started off with. So talk to us about River City Remanufacturing and the journey of inclusive employment and some of the impact that it's had on you and what you do. I spied your safety vest behind you, so we know that job can't happen at home, right?
River City Remanufacturing, we're a lumber remanufacturing plant. We're located here in Winnipeg. And basically what we do is we take dimension lumber and we slice and dice it down for pallet parts that we export to the US. We're just a little smaller than Microsoft with about 30 employees. So I think we're a little bit on the opposite ends of each other. Did you, as far as background, I'm gonna say we were a little fortunate. The last time I was with you folks was in 2018. We were located about 30-40 minutes outside of Winnipeg in Eli, and we decided to move back into Winnipeg, and decided to shut down all of our machines on March 12th. And so as we approached March 12th, getting ready for shutdown and everything else, I believe March 9th were for the orders for everything to shut down, etc., for quarantine. So so we were kind of fortunate in that sense, in that we sounds sad, but I mean, we were already disappointing people that we were going to be having to lay off some people just for a couple of weeks, and we brought everybody back. So so we already had the tension and the everybody being upset and everything else, and going through just the move itself. So then, but with that, it actually kind of helped us out, because it gave us a chance, when we were moving in, but it also gave us a chance to sit back and figure out what we needed to do during this pandemic, et cetera, and how to set things up. So we had to change our operation a little bit, and stagger our breaks and etc. But I think the biggest thing is the first thing that we did is we ensured everybody that we were actually an essential service. So with all of our sawdust, et cetera, which all goes to animal bedding, and that sort of thing. And of course, pallets move the world. So so we're actually busier than ever right now, and we honestly can't produce enough out of here. I wish we were a whole heck of a lot larger now. So so that kind of put everybody at ease as well. And so then, so from there, we've kind of had to take away our machoism a little bit and sort of say, oh, what do you mean you got a little bit of a sniffle? You got a little bit, come on, just get in here and just get her done. So whereas now we, okay, nope, stay home, take it if you need to take a test, etc. So we've kind of worked around that, and we've expanded from Monday to Friday. We've expanded to 7 days a week, so that we could accommodate that for our production, for our customers, our staff, etc. We started off as a skeleton crew, and we'll still kind of are there. But if somebody misses and they want to catch up on hours or anything like that, we have the weekend available for them for now. So I think that's all I've got to say. Other than
that's
if
great.
you've got any questions?
That's great.
But,
yeah, I will. I'll follow up on a couple points, because I think a couple
Okay.
of pieces that you noted are really important. Recognizing the importance of, how you support your staff in terms of if they need to take time, take it, because that has an impact beyond COVID, where you've created that open dialogue and element of trust, so that people come to you to have those conversations, and also, the accommodation to how people's work, what the work week looks like for any individual. And I know that even before COVID, so starting in 2018, when we look at sort of like design, inclusive design, and delivery of even training within River City Remanufacturing, and how innovative and the impact that's had. I know that you have experience down that road as well, through the experience you had with an employee a few years ago. Did you want to talk a little bit about the training, the onboarding at River City Remanufacturing, and how that impacted the workplace?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny now looking back on it. And I was actually thinking about you guys about 2 weeks ago when I had Reed in my office, and we weren't having a very pleasant conversation, and how he needed to do stuff and I needed to do stuff, and we were kind of clashing there a little bit, and it made me laugh, because I kind of reflect back to when Reed first started, and literally he's just like family now. So we have our little squabbles back and forth, and we always get to resolutions, which is anyway. Well, I could talk about Reed for hours, but so it's kind of one of the things that when we started with Reed, it was we got rid of the here you go, that's your line, make it or break it, just survive. And if you can cut it, you can cut it. If you don't, you don't. And that's, it's a terrible way of doing things. And so we've come a long way since then. Take our time, have a little bit of patience. Now, since it's video and I'm not in front of you, but I mean, I don't know why, but people get a little nervous around me for some reason. And so we've really adopted, to come on up, well, Maureen and those others have been in our Eli office, and it was even a little tighter than it is now, but now we have offices, we're getting a little fancier. But we encourage open dialogue. Again, it doesn't matter who is, like, come on up to the office, let's talk. If it's after hours, come up, and that the bald fat guy up in the office is not scary at all, and we'll work through anything. And so again, it's, and we've just gotten rid of that manufacturing culture, like, no, it's production and that's it. And because we want people to have fun. How much fun can lumber be? I'm not, it's not, but I mean, but you can, as long as you're getting your work done, as long as you're making your numbers and all that sort of stuff, let's have a positive attitude, because we're always changing, because things are always coming up in our world. So I don't know if I over-answered your question, under-answered your question. I apologize.
This is great. This is great. And I'm finding, like, the natural hooks and connections that I'm looking for, you're just giving them to me. So this is fantastic.
All right.
And some of the important pieces that, like work-life balance can be difficult in, any industry. And, from a Microsoft perspective, Jason, or a tech perspective, when you're connected all the time, how do you create that workplace culture where you have that balance? Because I think that, perhaps some of the, behaviors that you alluded to earlier, or some of the unhealthy potential, being on all the time, or what is the expectation of virtual work when I can, be connected from anywhere, anytime? What did that balance look like for you and your team?
It's such a good question, and in many ways is kind of going through a resurgence right now. And for those that are on the call that are based in Ontario, obviously the Ontario legislature just passed some legislation that has sparked curiosity out of us as Microsoft as employers, but many of our customers, to say, how do we adapt to this and how should we think about it? Well, we don't know the details as of yet. I think it's an interesting first step that I think in many ways Ontario is setting the pace on. And I don't generally will say that our Ontario politicians set the pace on many things, but I think there's a couple of things. So one, which is this idea of work-life balance, I think, is a bit of a fallacy. And it has been, frankly. It's how we think about it now, 18, 20 months into this pandemic, and moving forward, I think will continue to change. But it's really this idea of work-life integration, which is, where do you find the natural places for each of those to occupy their relevant amounts of time and space? For me as a leader, but I have the fortunate opportunity to talk to a lot of our customers, from federal government agencies through largest financial institutions in the country and everywhere else in between. I spend a lot of time talking about this. I often get asked, what's your crystal ball say of the future of work, and what does this mean? There's a couple of pieces that I would say. One, I think about it in three kind of categories, or three pillars, that every leader and every organization and individual should think about. One is this idea of mindset, which is, how do you think about this? And in many ways, for organizations, we've defined work as where you go, not what you do. And again, back to my earlier comments, and not downplaying, I'll say, organizations like Todd's that have played critical roles and frankly are keeping products moving right now in a world where supply chains are ever more important than they have been. But you got to kind of get centered on that mindset, which is, how do you think about this, and what does that look like for you? But what does it look like for your team? What does it look like for your organization? The second is this idea around culture. And for me, accessibility as part of a broader, diverse, and inclusive and equitable strategy for any company is equally the same on this, which is, it's a leader-led moment. We have a framework internally that we hold our managers accountable to that we refer to as model, coach, and care. It's actually part of our core accountabilities as managers and leaders. And those words themselves are fairly self-explanatory. Are you modeling the way? Are you exhibiting the behaviors that you would expect to see in your people? Are you coaching them through work challenges, personal challenges, life challenges to the degree that you can? And then the last, which is, are you demonstrating care? And that frankly hasn't been any more important than it has in the last 20 months. And then the third piece, which is probably coincidental on who I work for to be in the third bucket, is technology. Because technology can be a poison, but it can be a great connector, a great enabler to my earlier comments, and it does not solve every single solution. Some simple examples for me, which is, one, I've always been a person who has said to my team, myself, which is, I care little about when, where, and how you work, so long as the work gets done. And so that culture of trust that Todd already talked about, I tried to exhibit before this ever happened, but it's become even more important. And what's really important, and again, when you think about, I'll say, ability in its broadest context and inclusiveness in its broadest context, we are all going through this and have been going through this in our own personal ways. I have a dog, and I think, Megan, you and I have joked about this. I think Maureen and I have joked about this. Like, by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my team and everybody that generally works with me on a consistent basis knows I will happily take a phone call, but the likelihood is you will get me on my mobile phone, because that 2 to 2:30 slot is when my legs start to cramp up because I've been sitting on too many meetings. It's also when the dog starts to pant and I know he needs to go out. And so I save myself having to deal with that mess while at the same time making sure that my body moves. And I'll get up and go for a walk. And it's a behavior that I've created for myself. Nobody's told me to do that, but technology enables me to literally transfer phone calls from my home computer onto my mobile phone. And so nobody's none the wiser in many ways. And so this idea of being able to traverse back and forth between those two. The second piece, which is related to it, is this idea of creating sort of this digital experience. Again, that idea that says work is, we've historically defined it on where you go versus what you do. We've also designed historically the employee experience centered around that physical space. Now it's about how do we redesign it and think about how it applies to the individual. And for us, certainly experiences we've been through is there's never been a time to be more personal with your people. That is about having those team discussions. We're actually going through a process right now inside Microsoft where we're creating what we call hybrid team agreements. And that's how do we actually function together in a world where our corporate decision right now is you can work from home up to 50% of the time without any other prior approval. What are those norms? What are those standards against how we will work and think and how we will interact with one another? Because it is going to be different. This balance of synchronous and asynchronous is going to create a whole pile of complexity. As Satya, our CEO, has said, things become more complex in this hybrid world than not, because you have so many dimensions at play. And so for us, it's been about all of those pieces. But it's about the company in designing and defining some guardrails, and Todd sort of alluded to that. It's about us as managers and leaders on how we engage with our teams, but it's also ultimately about us as people. Where do we define our boundaries, and how do we have those open, transparent conversations? And in some cases, it is about disclosure. And in a world where there are so many invisible disabilities, I'm not suggesting this as everybody now needs to have the confidence to have those discussions, but think about how you do, so that you can have those conversations with your managers or your leaders, whatever the case may be, to say, hey, here's how I'm going to work in this new world. Does that work? And if not, how do we find sort of a compromise around it, right? Whether it's breakfast with the kids, whether it's picking up kids, whether it's taking aging parents to doctor appointments, to just being around for dinner. We've actually just released some research on this idea of the triple peak day. Our research, and again, as students of really this shift in how work happens, we're seeing these very logical 3 moments in the course of a day. The logical ones that you would see in the morning after breakfast and before lunch of peak volume of work, the second one in the afternoon, and a third one late in the evenings, because people are finding moments of flexibility in the course of their days that they're okay to come back later in the evening when they've got a little more space and time.
Absolutely. I love that. And I'm just, as you're talking, thinking about my day, and you know, setting boundaries as a woman who works, who's a mother, and all those, you know, intersecting I guess identities that I hold and how it impacts my work but how it fits with the theme of what you're describing as well. But one of the most poignant pieces and where I see synergies, especially between yourself and Todd, is that the personal aspect and the impact that that has on leadership, but on workplace culture. I mean, Todd talking about the importance of dialogue with your staff and that open door policy, and Jason doing the same in sort of, that virtual space allows for that transparency. And I think that, knowing that we've got 4 minutes left, I just want to identify that being a very important emerging theme that perhaps wasn't as noted as a strategic priority prior to COVID, but shouldn't have taken a pandemic to get us there, but has such great impact on not only, employees with disabilities, but on the entire workforce. And when we engage in that type of positive behavior at work, the outputs that we see in workplace culture, it's the ripple effect on inclusion and accessibility that's felt far and wide, and has that potential to really move the needle for not only attracting talent to business and organizations, but to retaining the staff that are there. And Todd, one of the things that you say, and I gave Jason a quote earlier, and I'm going to do a quote for you now, is that I want you to make me miss you. And that speaks to some of that part that Jason said around it's not where it's not what you do, it's where you go. So the impact of what your employees have when they're there. I mean, speak to that a little bit as we, some final comments as we wrap here. So I'll start with you, Todd, and then I'll bounce it back over to Jason for some final thoughts.
Yeah, I'll try and be quick here, but yeah, Jason kind of made my heart swell there a little bit, actually, because it's just something that I've been trying to achieve, and because Janine, who's worked with me for almost 15 years now, she's like, I spend more time with you than my husband, and and it's true. So we are working here so much, and so you feel bad sometimes because you're joking around, and but as long as you're getting your work done, hey, why not enjoy yourself, have a great time, and so, and to allude, for that quote or whatever, just to let everybody know, is that when I'm dealing with guys, and if they're not showing up, they're not late, they're late, or just doing some things that they shouldn't be doing, that's usually the speech that I give them, is because and I tell them, I know that there's not guidance counselors in high schools going, you know what, you really should work in a pallet factory or a lumber remanufacturing. I know that that's not out there, and I know we're kind of almost a means to get somewhere else. And so but at that particular point, when you're here, be the best that you can be, and then by all means, I'll send you off with with a great smile and a attaboy. So anyway, and again, thanks again for having me, and I appreciate that, and thanks, Jason. I'm gonna consider myself pretty much like a Microsoft employee now.
Right?
The same attitudes.
You're almost there. I love that. Yeah. And Jason, some final thoughts from you as we wrap up.
Yeah, I maybe a couple comments, and I can see some Q&A coming in. So Megan, Maureen, whoever's facilitating any of the Q&A, I'm happy to share my email address if there's questions specifically for me too. And so please do feel free to share that with anyone that has questions for me, or ping me on LinkedIn. There's a couple of things that maybe I'll just sort of close on. One, something that stands out as a critical concern for me right now is this idea of digital equity. We've certainly lived through it over the last 18 months of all being remote in many ways, shapes, or forms. Again, not painting broad brushes across the entire employment workforce in the country. We all have a role to play to create inclusive experiences for everyone in our organization and those who we work with, using tools and technology in many ways, I'll say self-servingly, that we embed as part of the Office apps and Outlook, things like using accessibility checker when you're sending emails. Think about how you create those behaviors by default, meaning don't ever assume that those are on the receiving end are able to read that content as you've authored it. Assume that they can't. And how do you go create those micro behaviors? The idea of turning on captions in virtual meetings, recordings, transcriptions, just create more inclusive experiences, because it's not just about those that may have a disability. We also acknowledge that people may be working at different times in different places, and you are unintentionally excluding them by not offering those experiences. So that would be one, which is we all have a role to play in being innovators for accessibility first. The second, which is in this hybrid world in which we are now in and will, frankly, I think foreseeably be for the future, talent is everywhere. And I think that that creates such an amazing opportunity for everyone. Think about individuals that perhaps couldn't leave their home due to built environment constraints of a workplace. The ability for them now to participate in the workforce and be able to do it from their comfort of their own homes through the power of technology, amazing. Again, too bad that a pandemic is the thing that is forcing that to become a reality and inspiring people to think about it differently. But we would be silly and absolutely remiss not to take advantage of that, because what would also be true is we are facing an incredible skill shortage in this country and in a broad number of industries, and our exclusion of that community just doesn't do any of us any good and makes no business sense, period. And then the third, which is we're all human. And this is the part that Maureen, I think, and you, Megan, have heard me say many times, which is sitting on the part of the side of Microsoft that is sort of very consumer and end user focused. I spend a lot of time talking about the human piece of it, which is it's been so humanizing to see glimpses inside people's lives, seeing cats and dogs and kids run across the screens. Let's not lose that, right? It's good for our soul. And so for me, I think there's a lot of benefits. Yes, there are some trade-offs, some hard balances, but I think there's an incredible amount of optimism that we should have as we try to adapt to this new world that frankly can create a more inclusive workforce for everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think it was a worthwhile additional 2 minutes that we've added to our session. I'm incredibly grateful for both of you for sitting down and chatting with me today. Jason, I think it was very timely that I think we heard your dog. He's ready to go for a walk. Perfect timing.
You heard that, did you?
Yeah, and to Jason's point, if there's any of those questions that come through, we'll be sure to connect those with either of you to answer. Thank you very much. On to you, Emil. Thank you so much.
Super. That's great. Thank you, Megan and Todd and Jason, for an excellent plenary. It's our fireside chat, as you called it. It was really enlightening. So thank you, guys. So in this next session, I will be speaking briefly about the DWC initiative governance. My name is Emil Tompa. I'm the director of the Center for Research on Work Disability Policy, and I sit on the DWC steering committee. It's hard to believe it, but we are now in our 5th year of the DWC initiative. We have held a conference each year around the December 3rd date, as well as a federal, provincial, and territorial policy roundtable in June of each year. As well, we've worked with you all to develop a pan-Canadian strategy on disability and work, and which we are now looking to put into action with your help. So I feel we've accomplished a lot over these last 5 years, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to briefly talk to you about our plans going forward. I am one of the longstanding members of the steering committee, along with Alec Farquhar from the Center for Research on Work Disability Policy, Maureen Hahn from the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, Steve Mantis from the Ontario Network of Injured Workers Groups, and Ron Saunders from the Institute for Work and Health. We also have a former member, Kathy Hawkins, who is from Inclusion NL. And if you've had the opportunity to sit on the opening sessions of the 4 days of our DWC conference, you are likely aware that we have added 4 new members that have been added to the steering committee, as well as serving as the MCs for each of the 4 days of the conference. They are Mahadio Sukai from CNIB, who was our day 1 MC, Dorme Elling from Rick Hansen Foundation, who was our day 2 MC, Krista Carr from Inclusion Canada, who was our day 3 MC, and then Tammy Yates from Realize, who was our MC for today. So we are really delighted to have these 4 new members to broaden our representation. On the first day of the conference, in the first set of parallel sessions, I gave a brief presentation and with PowerPoints about our governance plans. For those of you who weren't able to attend that session, that PowerPoint deck is available on the conference website. I encourage you to have a look at it if you're interested in learning more about our plans, because in the interest of time, I'm only going to give a brief overview of that here. So the governance plans, which we have prepared over the last couple of years, includes a vision statement, a mission statement, activities, some guiding principles, and core values. We have two primary entities within the plan governance structure. The first is a steering committee, and the second is an advisory committee. The steering committee is intended to be comprised of a balanced representation from disability organizations and community groups, service providers, research, and academia. Currently, it has 9 individuals, and as noted, we plan to continue to expand it. In particular, we have 3 spots reserved for representatives from grassroots community organizations. These seats have yet to be filled. Now, the advisory committee is to be comprised of a balanced representation of key stakeholder groups, including disability community organizations, labor, employers, medical clinical representatives, service providers, policymakers, and researchers. And we are striving to have 50% or more made up of persons with disabilities. Now, the advisory committee's inaugural chair is Dr. Michael Prince. He will be giving our closing comments shortly after this session. Other members will be selected for this committee in the months ahead. So now I'm going to move on to our reflections session. It's entitled Reflections from the Conference. We had a shout out to delegates interested in volunteering to provide approximately 1 minute of reflections in the conference. Specifically, we asked for comments on 3 possible items. The first is ideas for implementing the strategy's 2 pillars. And the first pillar is fostering disability confident and inclusive workplaces. And the second pillar is developing comprehensive supports for persons with disabilities. The second item is thoughts on measurement and evaluation of progress in reaching our vision of inclusive employment. Remember, we're emphasizing measurement and evaluation because that's really critical to be sure that we're making progress. And the third is promising ideas, practices, or initiatives that you've heard about at the conference or elsewhere that warrant profiling. So we had 6 volunteers. I hope they're all with us here. We are asking them to come on as panelists. So I'm hoping that they are available to join us. The first one was Selena Seguin. So Selena, if you're there, I hope you're joining us. Let me see if you're on the panelist with us. Selena Seguin. And then the second one was Seema Lambda. The third one is John Amarachi. The fourth is Terry Lynn Hewlett. The third is William Cowie. And the 6th is Keenan Weller. So I hope these panelists can all join us. Now, if you hadn't had a chance to volunteer yet, we'd be happy to have you join us if we have time. Just put up your hand or send us a comment through the chat button that you'd like to participate, and we will try to put you on as a panelist as well. We have hopefully room for about 10 people to speak. So let me just see, is Selena there with us?
Hi, yes, I am.
There you go, Selena. So Selena is a project coordinator with Autism CanTech. So Selena, if you want to give your 1 minute shout out to us.
Wonderful. Thank you for the warm introduction. As Emil said, my name is Selena Seguin. I'm the Work Integrated Learning Project Coordinator at Northwest College, working on a program called Autism CanTech. So first, I want to say a huge kudos and congratulations for everyone who organized DWC. Thank you for organizing such an impactful conference and connecting people across Canada. It's been invaluable hearing from individuals with lived experiences and allies in organizations throughout Canada looking to make change. So the pillar for reflection that I wanted to speak to is on promising initiatives, one of which being Autism CanTech or ACT, a program designed to support equitable opportunities and create a more diverse and inclusive workforce. It is a federally funded program that focuses on removing barriers to employment for young adults with autism, ages 18 to 30, to gain employability and technical skills and to prepare them for the workforce. So it's comprised of 4 months of in-class learning on technical and employability skills, followed by a 2-month paid work experience in the digital economy. So this is a new initiative that I wanted to highlight that was launched this year in Edmonton, Alberta, and it has expanded to Vancouver and Toronto, and most recently to online virtual program offerings. And we have already seen some incredible outcomes and impacts from our first cohort of students and employer partners. So as part of today's theme of moving forward together, I just want to connect and say, if there are any organizations or individuals that would like to learn more about how to participate in our supportive program, or if you feel you could be an ally of our program or just want to learn more, then please reach out and connect. Brooke Lifeso, our lead researcher, also did a great presentation on Autism Can Tech at DWC. So if you'd like to learn more, I'd encourage you to watch Brooke's pre-recorded presentation. So thank you for this time.
Hi, Terry Lynn. So Terry Lynn is accessibility talent specialist, diversity and inclusion at People's Experience at the City of Toronto. So take it away, Terry Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just gonna, first, I really just wanted to say, thank you again to the conference organizers. I just want to echo the same thing that everybody else had said. I think it's a huge job putting this together. And I'm just wondering if people could just refrain from using the chat just for a second. I really wanted to first just say that I wanted to send my condolences to everyone who knew Marcia Ryu. She had an international and national, as well as a local impact on the cross-disability community and the landscape of how we're moving forward today. And she's one of the first people who founded one of the master's program at York University in Ontario. So I just wanted to reflect on Marcia Ryu's contributions to the cross-disability movement. But reflecting on the conference, Dawn Canada, Bonnie Brayton, and CCRW, Annie Parzerolato, my apologies, I think I butchered your name, continues to raise our awareness and our need to really address the intersectional identity experiences from a cross-disability perspective and how our personal lives really impact our access to work, and how can we collaborate together to really resolve some of these issues and really continue to have that ongoing conversation about childcare, caregiving responsibilities, violence against women in our homes and at our home offices as well. There's really been some coverage on the news, even last night, about violence against women during COVID. But what I've noticed throughout the, reflecting upon the conference, there was a lot of presentations on racialized diversity from different community groups, which was really amazing to see them come forward. And really just moving forward, we're really looking at equity and inclusion a lot differently in terms of recruitment and interviewing, hiring, and the onboarding process. And how can we raise that equity within the disability community? Because it's not one homogeneous group. We really have to approach inclusion differently within the cross-disability community. In the previous section, Ron asked the question about what can government do? And I don't feel like I answered that question really well, but really, I think at all levels, we really need to take that cross-disability lens with regards to recruitment and interviewing and that whole onboarding process to really help set people with disabilities up for success. And more importantly, similar to what Jason said in the previous session, talent is everywhere. And so let us open up that cross-disability access so that everyone can participate. I know that the City of Toronto is in that stage of really trying to look at programs and services to raise that equity, looking at internal collaborations with different divisions and hiring managers and staff, people with disabilities, gathering information from hiring managers as well as staff from people with disabilities to get that perspective of how to raise that equity. And it's similar to what Yasmin LaRoche from the Federal Public Service was talking about. We're really wanting to work to make that intentional change at all levels of the hierarchy. And I know that we all, we talked in that session about how we want that quick remedy and we want that change right away. And we want it sooner than later. But unfortunately, it is going to continue to take time. We have to work with the existing bureaucracies, the different divisions, departments, the union and the non-union roles. Change still has to happen in that time-sensitive manner. So we definitely need to continue with that community collaboration. It is going to be a two-way conversation, or a dialogue rather, to raise awareness and to eradicate some of those obstacles, and creating those recruitment programming and professional development opportunities that is equitable. And it may not always look like the typical or the traditional, say, online application process.
Yes, thank you. No, that's really great message. I really appreciate you giving some of those key highlights from the conference, Terry Lynn. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
We'll move on to William Cowie. If you'll turn on your camera and microphone, William.
I'm sitting here waiting for my vaccine booster, actually. So a little bit of anxious moments between navigating that and presenting. Thank you very much to the conference and Emil for giving us this time. I'll keep my comments brief, but and to the point. And also congratulations to the conference. It's been excellent on many levels. As we think about moving forward together, the question we must ask, I think, is what is the end game for the inclusion plan? Many at this conference know what is needed and have a general vision of what is a better world for persons with disabilities and what it will look like. But the question for us is, how do we get there? And one aspect of that answer for us is clear. Whatever future we want to build, it will need more funding and resources than now, and considerably more. More than just amount, however, the system needs a new resourcing model, as the current fragmented, inefficient, and in many ways ineffective system is simply not going to be up to the task. As anyone who knows Every Canadian Counts knows, we've been saying that a better model does exist and can be found in Australia, where resources are generated and administered through a mechanism of a publicly funded disability insurance regimen. This system addresses many of the features we would see as making up that better world for persons with disabilities in Canada. Lifetime individual plans based on need, equitable supports for all disabilities, lifetime commitment and reduced bureaucracy, performance-based organizations no longer competing for funds, but drawing from a single funding pool. But this is Canada, you might say. To understand how such a program for Canada would work, please see our Every Canadian Counts policy paper moving forward, building the framework for an inclusive future for persons with disabilities and their families on our website. Thank you.
Thank you, William, and thanks for highlighting the really incredible program in Australia. We've heard a lot about it. It'd be really interesting to learn more about how it works and the successes it's having. Our next speaker is Keenan Weller, who is co-leader and director of communications at Live Work Play. Keenan, take it away.
Thank you so much. Last week, I had the pleasure of hosting a panel about the partnership between Live Work Play and the Federal Public Service. And my comments today relate to how we keep moving forward with inclusive employment as communities and as a country, and the role of good data in that process. The Employment Equity Act of 1995 sought equality in the workplace to correct the historic employment disadvantages experienced by women, Indigenous communities, persons with disabilities, and visible minorities. The Accessible Canada Act, not yet 3 years old, seeks the full and equal participation of all persons, especially those with disabilities, with the identification, removal, and prevention of barriers. Yesterday, Yasmin Larache mentioned new disaggregated disability data, which sheds light on the harsh exclusion suffered by the most marginalized populations in Canadian society, such as people with intellectual disabilities and autistic persons, as detailed earlier today in the People First panel on sheltered workshops. This group of Canadians is not yet free of systemic and attitudinal institutionalization, with unemployment that is more than twice that of the general disability population. As a federal public service and as a country, We must tackle head-on the barriers facing our most disadvantaged populations with design thinking and genuine commitments that are based in accountability for delivery of lasting change in the form of authentic, inclusive employment for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Keenan, and thank you for pointing out the importance of really thinking about some of the most marginalized populations. We can't leave them behind. It's really critical that we think about the whole sum total of all the people who need the supports to be able to participate actively in the world of work if they so choose to do so. Do we have anybody else who's come forward to participate on as a 1 minute kind of oversight of what they've taken from the conference? Anybody? We
have a couple of good comments that are coming through the chat. People are sharing their experiences. So far, no one has raised their hand. You're muted.
Okay, sorry, I'm just going to read out one of the comments I see here that's quite compelling.
Sorry, Emil, there is
Yes.
somebody with their hand up.
Oh, there is? Okay.
No, they put it down. Sorry, it was Leslie. She had her hand up.
Oh, okay. Okay, well,
Anyway.
that's actually the comment I was going to read from Leslie Dunn. So Leslie, if you want to come forward, maybe you can read it out yourself.
I'm actually here. Yeah, thank
Go
you.
for it.
So basically what I was thinking is that my statement says community needs to lead the conversation. And I think that that's really important. A lot of the things that I have heard over the course of the last 4 days is really about people remembering the value of first voice, and first voice needs to drive everything that we do. And it's not about service providers or government entities or policymakers deciding what needs to be done for you. Community has everything it needs to address their concerns. We need to move away from doing things to people and remember that it's important to work alongside people. Measurement will lead to being able to assign a value to an outcome. And it's important to remember that government values what it's purchasing. It doesn't value what it's funding. So when we ask for it, it's going to need more money. We need to be mindful of, is the government purchasing a service from us to achieve that outcome, or do they believe that they are just funding an activity? What is the overall value of moving our marginalized workforce into employment? That is really important, to assign a collective and unified and agreed upon value to that shift. If we can have everyone measure and assign a unified value to their outcomes, we will have a significant tool to leverage. Finally, in addition to deconstructing hiring systems, we need to deconstruct silos as service providers. We each have gifts and assets to bring to the collective work. Let us recognize and share them without hesitation.
Thank you so much, Leslie. We have one more person here. I see Hubert Van Niekerk. Hubert, did you want to speak for a minute or so?
Yes, I'm also on the board with Every Canadian Counts. And just to highlight, I put our website address in the chat room and also a direct link to our moving forward document to how we can get this accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, Hubert. Okay, so we're at 3:15, so I'm going to move on to our final piece for the conference, closing remarks. So it's my pleasure to introduce our perennial favorite speaker, Dr. Michael Prince. He is the Lansdowne Professor of Social Policy at the University of Victoria. He's a long-standing community activist and volunteer, and he is also a member of the Canadian Disability Advisory Group, working with Minister Qualtrough, the Federal Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Disability Inclusion. And as I mentioned, Michael is also the inaugural chair of our DWC Advisory Committee. So take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Emil. Yeah, it's great to be back, and nice to be part of the 5th annual Conference on Disability Work Canada. And I am speaking to you today from my office at the University of Victoria here on Vancouver Islands. And I want to begin by acknowledging with respect that I am working and living on the Lekwungen speaking peoples territories, and University of Victoria stands here, as does my own home. And I want to acknowledge the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasonic peoples whose historical relationship with these territories continue to this day. And I say that as an acknowledgement to recognize that the history of colonization and the associated attitudes and policies and institutions that have significantly changed and altered Indigenous peoples' relationships with these lands. Here at the university, we are striving to a commitment to addressing these historical and still continuing barriers. And as part of our commitment to reconciliation, we are working to build more meaningful connections and partnerships with Indigenous communities. And we are working to bring our university into better harmony with Indigenous cultures, beliefs, and ways of knowing. And I think, as I said that today, and I thought about it, I think it's those sort of remarks and sentiments are very appropriate for the work that DWC has been ongoing over the last 5 years and the development of the Pan-Canadian strategy on work and employment for persons with disabilities in this country. I too just want to quickly echo big congratulations to the presenters and the moderators and the staff behind the scenes who have done such a tremendous job over the last 4 days of the conference. I think it was 28 sessions, the networking opportunities, really rich discussions, great ideas, great voices that have been heard, continuing to build on and enrich the thinking and moving forward together. I just want to take a few minutes and reflect on some observations and also some remarks. And one of them is we're now well placed at this 5th annual conference to have a well-defined vision or strategy. And over the last several days, I heard words like the deep change and fundamental change, the need for full inclusion. I heard about equity, vocabulary, positive transformations, the need for comprehensive supports that are also customized and contextualized, disability confident employers and workplaces, and also sustainable employment opportunities to be generated. What we've got there is a very clear idea of a vision around inclusion, of enhancing equality of opportunity and choice in the areas of careers and jobs and in workplaces. The issues around that vision are, how do we dismantle the continuing obstacles? How do we challenge and confront the continuing attitudinal barriers? And how do we continue to kind of overcome or scale over the barriers that still persist and present themselves? They've no doubt been heightened by the COVID pandemic over the last 20 odd months, and will continue to do so as we manage with continuing variants over the next year or two, I believe. So, there's a lot of references to the vision, and I think a real shared vision of that together. I also heard a number of very powerful critiques and critical observations about the present state of affairs, much of which applied pre-COVID. And I think a lot of people noted that what COVID did was highlight or accentuate longstanding challenges and barriers and discriminatory practices that persist to this day. One of our presenters said our public systems are failing us, rather dramatic and profound critique. Others talked about the underfunding. We heard about wait lists for essential public services and for personal supports and home care aids and the devices that exist in pretty well every province and territory and Indigenous community throughout Canada. We heard that there needs to be an intersectional framework to disability, and particularly intersecting and addressing the intersecting systems of oppression and exclusion that continue this day. So along with a tremendous hope and commitment to the vision, we also heard, I think, some very stark critical observations about present affairs still. But we also thirdly heard about promising practices, and a lot of the workshops or sessions and the networking sessions that followed them were really motivating and inspiring, and offer pockets of innovation and pockets of hope as to what we have an inclusive vision which really looks to the future and is an aspirational set of values. But in the here and now, in the present day, and we've heard this over the last several years at these conferences, one of the best features I enjoy listening to and learning every year at these conferences is to hear from people about the activities that are already happening, that are positive and moving forward, and offer lessons for moving towards, whether it's adequate supports for people or inclusive workplaces or progressive employers or hopeful partnerships that are going on between organizations. So the issues here aren't about dismantling or confronting, but they're how do we build up and scale up? How do we expand on and enhance these positive practices that we can see and we observe and we learn? So from that sort of set of observations, it got me thinking that part of what we might call effective advocacy and effective partnerships moving forward is that in our conversations moving forward, we try to be self-aware that we try to connect these, whether it's the vision, the critiques and the critical observations, but also the promising practices. And at times we can be at meetings where we tend to focus on one more than the others. We may be, then there's some people who like to do one more than the others. They might like to do the visionary or strategic high level. Other people are more grounded and say, oh, that's all well and good, but I want to hear about practical tools and mechanisms and ways of working and actual concrete results. And the vision's great, but I want to hear about the concrete. And others that are quite aware and quite sensitive to wanting to continue to draw to all Canadians' attentions the persistent challenges and barriers that face so many Canadians with disabilities in seeking a dignity and seeking work and a livable income and a better quality of life. So, but effective advocacy in my mind really needs to connect those three pieces together simultaneously in some way. So in moving forward together, that's one bit of reflection that I would share with people is trying to do that while we combine the notions of vision and values with concrete practices, along with the clear sense of the fire in our bellies around the obvious injustices and inequalities and exclusionary practices that still persist far too much in Canadian society. The theme of the conference in this last day about moving forward together, a couple of things I think I was struck by and reminded of over the time was the importance of collaboration and collaborative networks and partnerships. Of course, there's other ways of moving forward together, particularly led by particular organizations or parts of an organization. But I think we realized that social networking that went on at this kind of conference is absolutely essential, as well as more formalized and intentional partnerships and networking across organizations. And those can be quite formalized and permanent, or they can be more periodic or issue oriented and quite strategic around a particular issue. In this day and age, they're going to be hybrid networks, in person and virtual as well. And it'd be nice to have this conference in person again in 2022. And those kind of collaborative networks need to be informed, I heard, by many people over the last 4 days, by not only a cross-disability lens, but also an intersectional framework, which continues to grow and become more sophisticated and ambitious over time as to the range of identities and groups that need to be addressed and issues. A culturally safe and respectful way of working together, whether that's with Indigenous communities or other groups traditionally disadvantaged and marginalized in our society. And a nice message this year of the importance of community-based evaluations, community-based knowledge production, and generating both from stories and narratives, but also more quantitative research at times, establishing baselines, measurements. And again, there are many ways of doing that, but linked to the idea of nothing without us, people first, making it community-based and co-ownership at the minimum of the kind of knowledge that gets generated and disseminated and shared. And there's many benefits, of course, as you all well know, to these kinds of networking partnerships, whether it's sharing experiences and doing evaluations, holding each other and holding others accountable. And that's part of what moving forward together is about. It's about our own accountability to each other as allies and as partners, but then also in engaging with the other stakeholders or governments that we clearly want to advance agendas of reform for. So accountability clearly is a key factor of those partnerships. And extending and identifying additional allies. moving forward. And again, these conferences provide a wonderful opportunity to invite speakers and presenters from a range of groups, building on some of our core stakeholders, whether it's business and labor, the disability communities, and advancing that out to larger and related social movements and groups in Canadian society. And it's all about creating, at the end of the day, collective power, collective legitimacy, collective momentum for not only imagining, but implementing new possibilities towards a better world, better life. And the last point I want to make is, of course, the primary focus of these conferences is around employment and careers and jobs and workplaces. Hence the title, DWC. And some of that, of course, is very much picked up by the Disability Inclusion Action Plan that Minister Qualtrough announced actually before the last federal election, but has kind of reaffirmed and spoke a bit about in her remarks to this conference. But of course, this employment focus of inclusive workplaces and better working opportunities for Canadians with disabilities can only happen within a larger context of complementary initiatives and reforms, whether that's community services and personal supports, which still many Canadians with disabilities have unmet needs or underserved needs, income security, income reform, which is being taken up a bit with the idea of a new Canada disability benefit, tax reform, which I think really has to be a key issue for all social movements and all those equality-seeking groups in Canadian society over the coming years. How do we move towards tax fairness and a more equitable tax system? Reforms in housing, education, of course, transit, transportation, violence against women, mental health, and other healthcare services. The list is long, the needs are great, and that's why we need to work together to do it together as we move forward. So just in conclusion then, there was tremendous energy, great ideas over the last 4 days around visions and values as they are exemplified now in the Pan-Canadian strategy. We heard continuing around the critiques of the challenges and continuing exclusions and harms and indignities that Canadians with disabilities have to struggle through and are deal with on a daily basis. But we also heard some, I think, inspirational and inspiring and hopeful examples of promising practices and innovations that show what is possible and what can be done, and the challenge is to move forward. So that's really, final remarks then is congratulations. Continue to work together effectively. Let's connect together constantly the vision and the critiques and the practicing promises. Let's continue to network together and work in coalitions, and all the best moving forward. And hopefully next year, my last comment would be the next year or two are absolutely critical. We have a window of opportunity for some major changes and advances in disability issues and in inclusion and in equity that perhaps we haven't seen for quite a number of years. There's skepticism, of course, but for those of us who are steadfast advocates and hang in on these issues, we've got good work to do. It'll be hard work, but the potential, I think, is quite attractive. The potential is quite exciting to move forward and truly make Canada a more inclusive and fair and equal society. Thank you very much, and all the best.